Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi nunui ki a koutou katoa, kua tai mai nei te ata nei, ki te whakarungo, ki te mātakitaki i tēnei kōrero. He uri tēnei no te aroa waka, ko Cian Elyse White tōku ingoa, ko au te kauhautu toi whakari o te kaunihira o ngā roto o Rotorua. I am Cian Elyse White, for those of you I don't know, kia ora. I am currently, I'm a writer, director, actor, producer, but also one of the hats I wear at the moment is I am the Performing Arts Director of the Rotorua Lakes Council and also the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. So kia ora. I'm so excited by this initiative that the Rotorua, Te Akamauri, Rotorua Library, and also the Performing Arts team and Arts and Culture team as a part of the council have designed. And so, yeah, this is our very first Rotorua Matangiro, Rotorua Artists chats. And we are so excited to be talking to Rotorua's very own, but now Melbourne-based, JP Pomare, Josh Pomare. No mahara mai hoa, ngā mihi, welcome.
Kia ora, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, look, I've introduced myself. I think you're a critically acclaimed novelist. You have had immense success with both of your novels. Your first one, Call Me Evie, and In the Clearing, which I've had the absolute pleasure of delving into during this lockdown. And yeah, I mean, I know, Rotorua is so proud of you and I know of you, but yeah, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what, where you're at and how you got to where you are now.
Sure thing. Yeah, I guess I'm Josh Pomare. I grew up in actually out past Nongataha, so Kaharoa on the back road towards Tauranga. Yeah, and I've lived in Melbourne for off and on for the last sort of 11 or 12 years, and I suppose I started writing seriously in my early 20s, I'd say, writing short stories, and moved on to reviews and articles and that sort of thing, whilst I was still working full time, and it was a pretty thankless gig, I think, writing for literary magazines and stuff like that, but I think it's a good way to cut your teeth. So I did that for a few years, and then yeah, eventually started to have a few short stories published and started to get lots of positive rejections for short stories and longer pieces. And then finally I wrote a novel and yeah, and then that was published, I don't know, a few years ago now. And yeah, so I don't know, I've just kind of had a pretty lucky run, and now I'm living in Melbourne still, writing full time, and yeah, been loving it.
That is so awesome. And I mean, I know as well, I mean, I've only just recently moved back to Rotorua in the past 3 years. I was based in Auckland, but I remember when I first came home, I remember seeing an article or an advertisement for your book launch, which was for Call Me Evie, which I believe was January 2018 at McLeod's. I think it would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that time. And I thought, who is this Māori boy? We're the same age, 30. An award-winning novelist. Not that it's oh my gosh, a Māori boy doing well, but it's like, oh my gosh, a Rotorua boy just like carving his own way in the literary, sphere, absolutely nailing it. So, and I mean, I've written a wee quote down here. Exquisite literary chiller, an atmospheric nerve jangler with a distinct style and voice. Wow, that's a bit of a slam dunk. Like, I don't know about you, but writing is, I feel it's of all of the art forms the most exposing, because it really is you being vulnerable and sharing your inner thoughts and your perspectives on mankind and the world and sort of, so tell me about that. Tell me what it was like when you had 8 different publishing companies, organizations going, hey, we want your book.
Yeah, I mean, that was, among other things, largely the product of having a really savvy literary agent as well. So I think lots of the hard work kind of happens before you submit the book. Obviously, you have to write and things like that. But then, for me, and certainly for me, there was an eye for the commercial potential in the story as well. So lots of the editing and redrafting process was about making sure this is a book that publishers would want. So as much as I wanted to write a great story, and as much as I wanted to write this, and certainly with Call Me Evie, that particular story, so much of those last, so much of just getting it into the hands of publishers and making sure they wanted it was about how I edited and redrafted and things like that, which is easier said than done, of course. So it was a learning curve, and I think it's not the writer's instinct to want to necessarily appeal to a commercial model publishing market. So part of it is also negotiating that in a way where you still feel comfortable with the art form, still feel comfortable with the process. But yeah, it was, I guess part of your questions, how that, not necessarily how did it come about, but how did it feel? And at the time it was really exciting, but it's an accumulation and this kind of compounding excitement, because it's not like a lottery ticket. And I think there is a certain misconception that's really made popular by the stories of like J.K. Rowling and other authors who were rejected 10 times or sometimes 50 times and this breakout success. And, in reality that they do happen, but they're the exception, not the rule.
The rule. Yeah, I totally know what you mean by that.
You get a small publishing history. So I kind of had these small successes along the way. Getting an agent was a small success. And then you have realistic conversations about with your agent. It doesn't necessarily feel real all the time, but they're adjusting expectations, saying, hey, we've got a good chance of getting this published. And there's also that real sense of validation when I was agented and when I was getting short stories published and things. It marks progress, So it was bloody exciting, but it wasn't that particular moment. I think the most exciting moment was when I was commissioned for a short story for, I think it was like $400 or something, for a literary magazine. And that was much more exciting for some reason. But yeah, I think it's just that they each mark a point in my career and progress.
I really like what you're saying about what is exciting. And I think, this is the commercial sort of outward facing measure of success. These like incredible, I suppose, critically acclaimed, the sentiment of, oh, this is the new one to watch. But I love what you're saying. It's much more about kaupapa or purpose and what aligns with you. And the $400 article you were asked to write was something that really set you on fire. So let's sort of delve into that then. I think it's clear that you have really spearheaded an amazing beginning trajectory for your career. But in terms of purpose, I just want to visit Call Me Evie. And this wonderful book is set in Melbourne and Maketu, which Rotorua audiences will know Maketu. Maketu is like paradise on the edge of Rotorua, on my Maketu ki Tongariro. So really it is such an important, significant place. Why Maketu? What were your thoughts around why you were like wanting to set it in Maketu as well?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of things to unpack there. I think the first thing I'd say about Maketu is it's really familiar if you are in Rotorua or the surrounding areas. Even, like there's people in Waihi, which isn't so far away, that wouldn't be at all familiar with Maketu. So it's really familiar perhaps to the audience, but it's, as in the audience right now, but it's not so familiar to people certainly outside of the Bay of Plenty. So I thought it would be cool because, outside of New Zealand, people have this idealized, but also like this tourism focused ideal of New Zealand. So I think part of me was also drawn to the fact that people don't really know what's off State Highway 1 or outside of the tourist traps. So I wanted to write about a place I knew really well. By the way, I love Makatu. I've got a brother and a sister in Pukahina, which is just up the road. And, you know, when I was younger, we used to go out surfing or go for boys' weekends away over there, and we would stay at a friend's family house over there, and we would, we'd just drink beers or whatever, go down to Nudix. And we had some really interesting interactions with the locals. And I just remember thinking at the time, this would be if I was running away from something, you know, whatever, the police or whatever, you know, if I ever needed to hide out, that's precisely where I would go.
Nice, because it's like rural and isolated, and I think so. Call Me Evie, real quick for those of you who haven't read it, is it's been referred to as a chilling thriller set in both Melbourne and Maketu with an unreliable protagonist. So young 17, she is 17, isn't she, year-old Kate Evie is sort of like the opening, without giving too much away. She's sort of the first chapter. She has woken up and she's in a very strange, isolated town, place outside of her own country. And she's not sure. She's very, and that's the other thing I wanted to talk about, actually, just her state of mind and the theme, really strong theme in both of your books, Call Me Evie and In the Clearing, around PTSD and trauma.
Yeah.
So, as the reader, I was wondering, wow, like I've seen, you know, people that I know that do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and have experienced very visceral sort of episodes of muscle memory due to their past trauma. What made you want to make Evie, or that character, a female? Why a female protagonist? Actually, both of the books have strong female protagonists that suffer from PTSD, or sorry, potentially not that label, but they have a major sort of traumatic, I think, emotional pain bodies. So talk a little bit about that, if you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word I'd use is they've kind of fraught psychological landscape. So, and I think it's complex. It's much more complex. Just to talk about the psychology, it's much more complex than this is. Well, let me put it this way: if you research a condition like PTSD, I think your impulse is always to put every single symptom into this character, and I think you make it really obvious that this is what they have. And but what tends to happen, if you go to a psychologist and present with certain symptoms but not others, you'll still likely be diagnosed. So I think when we look at trauma-related issues, it's not necessarily a spectrum, but there's a whole host of different kind of symptoms that are related to this. So for both characters, whatever the shape of their psychological landscape is trauma-induced.
Yes.
Yes. So in any case, why women? Well, I think for me, I think that the types of themes I want to explore, you don't really have an access point from the bloke's perspective. It's too easy. I didn't want to write about war, for instance, or whatever. And blokes' trauma is completely different to women's. I think it's more subtle, more implied. It tends to be for women. I think for men, we always, although this isn't always the case, we always look to sort of overt violent acts, and how it's internalized is completely different. And I think it was just, it's just doesn't really appeal to me for some reason, writing those sorts of stories and accessing that. Oddly, I've had real trouble with book 3, wrangling it into shape and finding the story and the characters. And up until this most recent draft, it was always from the male perspective, and I found it
Wow.
really challenging. And I think again that was just the problems that that men face is not really, it sort of pales in comparison. And certainly in the thriller genre, you know, like I have to be realistic about where I fit in the literary ecosystem, and I'm writing books that are suspenseful, but largely largely for a female audience, largely writing about issues that pertain to much more so women than men. So I think certainly with book 3, accessing that from a male perspective, what I was trying to work through, there's a element that is loosely based on New Zealand SAS potential war crimes. So there is actually a war element in this story, and I still really struggled to, I guess, find a way to make that point of access work from the male perspective.
I'm really interested in what you're saying about sort of the subtlety and the nuanced, the access points you have to the female emotional pain body or even journey, and that fraught psychological landscape being, it sounds what you're saying, it's much more accessible and malleable and fluid, much more, so therefore as a writer it's just, there's more freedom within that than there is sometimes within, and potentially it's because we're not ready to see, or the the masculine or the patriarchal point of view of that is still quite rigid and still quite this is the pinnacles of, or this is the pillars of what it means to be a man going through something. And so I hear what you're saying, and I'm actually quite excited, and I'm wondering what it might be like in the future to look at what a more nuanced emotional journey might be like for a male protagonist as well. And I can't really off the top of my head think of any novels that do that. So that's so interesting. I really thank you. That's a really, really good insight. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Just on that point, there's a really great novel. It was an Irish novelist about American Civil War. Days Without End. Sebastian. Is it Sebastian Barry? Maybe he's not Irish. I don't know where he's from. But that's a fantastic novel that definitely does that. And I think for me, like, I don't know, am I gonna write my life story? Maybe I will, but it's like to write like the sensitive boy. I don't know if I'm there. I just don't know if I can do it. Like in terms of emotional honesty from characters, maybe I don't have the skill to show it for a very masculine bloke. I don't know, but it's a real challenge I've found.
Yeah, it's fantastic to talk about our challenges, as artists and as writers. And I think, but you do such a wonderful job. That's why I wanted to ask you how you did it, really. I felt like you nailed, sort of the nuances of what it is to be a wahine or a female going through, just certainly from my experience anyway, some of the...
Yeah. Well,
in a chat, I was like, how did he... And did you have inspiration, or did you talk to people, women?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I would say is like a real praise, and I think other authors have said this writing from the female perspective. The best praise you can get is to get like misgendered in reviews and things, which happens.
Lovely.
Certainly not, published in like national broadsheets or anything, but like reviews online and things, I've definitely been misgendered a lot. And then the flip side of that, which fortunately hasn't really happened for me, is when people say, "Oh, you can tell it's written by a man" or whatever. I think I've been lucky in that when I'm writing from these perspectives, I've got a fantastic team around. Like I'm married to a woman, which helps a lot. My very early readers tend to be women, and I don't necessarily get pulled up a lot on a lot of things, but it does, I guess, give me the confidence to know that I'm not getting it wrong. And if I am, I want someone to make sure they make it clear to me. So Even, most of my editorial team are female, which is really, which is a really real boon if you have anxieties about representation and getting things wrong, which I do. So I do speak to people, I do research. There's little things like people love the story about like shaving my legs. People tend to like weird, odd research stories like that. So I did other things to kind of inhabit the character.
All right. Can I just stop you there? So this is like you doing character research. So you.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Cool. It's sort of like what just from an acting background, that's what we do. We write given circumstances and then go and sort of like it's character acting. It's method. So you go out and you're like, Anthony Hopkins had a really difficult marriage when he was shooting Silence of the Lambs, because I heard he brought his character home. So so that's what you did. You shaved your legs and you did some things to try and get
Okay. I wouldn't say I'm a method writer, but I know a friend of mine, Laura, who her entire personality changes when she's writing certain characters, and she's she's written about the Jonestown massacre, and it's a great book, by the way. It's called Beautiful Revolutionary, but she really gets into her characters' heads. She has to go to wherever they are, which I do to some extent. I spent enough time in Makitu to kind of back myself to catch an authentic representation of the place. Although, last time I went back, I noticed the pie shop's like this big factory now, and like there's certain things that have changed. And so it's for me. Right now I'm writing about Lake Tarawera, and I've spent enough time out Okaraka and Tarawera to kind of get a sense of the place. And as much as you want it to be, this perfect representation, you have to make concessions in fiction. And I don't want anyone who lives out Tarawera to read and go, this isn't Tarawera. Because this, the landing cafe is called something different or moved, or the lake's slightly bigger or smaller or whatever. I don't mind if they say this isn't Tarawera, because factual things are slightly, distinctly Tarawera things are slightly different. But it would bother me if they said this doesn't feel like Tarawera. This hasn't got the atmosphere of Tarawera. And it was the same with Makitu. So, and characters and everything that inhabit these places as well. So I'm sort of, I'm really trying to capture a sense of atmosphere. And so the last time I was in New Zealand, we took a drive out Tarawera, and it's just that thing of trying to pick up on the details and the atmosphere of a place. But not only that, I'm talking about my writing experience right now because I'm in it, but with The Last Guest, which is the next book, I have been writing an anaesthetist. The character was an anaesthetist, and I've just changed it to a paramedic, which isn't as easy as it sounds. There's a lot of new scenes and things, but that was this thing where one of my good friends, lives in Okaraka and has most of his life, and he's a paramedic, and it was that authenticity, I could capture that much more clearly than I could, or much more accurately, I guess, than if it were an anaesthetist. Although I had spoken to and interviewed medical staff, anaesthetists, and been in hospitals and things, I still couldn't quite capture that same level of authenticity as a paramedic.
It's wonderful, and it makes so much sense as well to use what and sort of you've got direct access to someone who's close to you, who can sort of give you a detailed depiction, I suppose, of what it is to be in that business. And I'm really interested as well just to delve into the world. So obviously you have a fantastic ability to write about what because Rotorua, Makitu, Tarawera, this was your backyard growing up. and your whānau is still here. How do you, dealing with culture alongside of that? So obviously, you know, you've got the different hapu within Te Arawa as well that you're dealing with, I suppose, when you're writing about specific parts of specific areas. How do you, so like with Kate, for example, I know it's not directly implied, but is she Māori? Is she Kiwi? What is her other, because her mother's ancestry?
Yeah, no, for me, I mean, for me, it was about putting her in a place where she is very distinctly an outsider.
Yeah.
And so she's, in my mind, she was New Zealand, the New Zealand side of ancestry is New Zealand European. And that was, you know, that was largely because I didn't, that's just another, it's another, something else for her to grab onto into this place. I didn't want that. I wanted as much isolation as possible. So yeah, no, she's, she's not, and she's surrounded by a cast of largely Māori and Māori representing, you know, like distinctly Māori people in Makatu. So that was also just this sense of this reversal from her life in Melbourne, where although it's multicultural, the dominant, and certainly in terms of representation in the media and so on and so forth, the dominant, it's a monocultural kind of representation.
Yeah, you did such a good job at that, by the way. I think you're an expert at settings. Like your settings are very much so, the worlds are very much so their characters in the book. So Maketu was, I believe, a very strong character, and so was Melbourne. And the juxtaposition of those two, you know, vastly contrasting settings and environments, I think played well as well into the different, into Kate's life and into Evie's life. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, you're wonderful at using the taiao or the environment in your books, and it's the same within The Clearing. You know, I noticed you put Freya's by the river, so again there's that water constantly flowing, and that you can hear it, you can really hear your worlds, and you can smell it and you can see it and feel it. And I think that's a real skill, which helps, I think, your work, because I mean they're page turners, both of them. You know, you've really nailed that ability to create that, but also yeah, I mean, you've got such a skill with writing the nuances of the female, the wahine psyche, I believe, anyway. So yeah, congratulations.
There's lots of nice things you said there.
What's that?
You said there's lots of nice things.
I know, I was just like, I just feel like I've just been asking you questions, but I feel like, I've actually got a couple of other nice things to say to you, because we have some comments here. So Tiana Hodge said, "Kapai, I just wanted to say I'm absolutely transfixed by your books. Thank you, Josh." Nice. Sue Weary says hi. And Jill Nicholas says hi, Josh. So I think you've touched on your new book, Days Without Ending. No, that's the book.
No, I wish.
I'm sorry, that was not, apologies, The Last Guess.
Yeah.
And so The Last Guess is your new book. And can I just ask, at the end of In the Clearing, there was the little epilogue with the Watcher. Is there potentially a second?
Possibly. I mean, I've thought a lot about it, and I think, I don't know, me and my publisher haven't really had much of a chat about it. I think there's definitely the potential for it. I think ultimately probably my publisher would want that. So, you know, we've had, so we sold the like film, TV rights, and you have conversations with people before, you know, often anyway, before they purchase the rights. And one of the conversations we had was about, because TV are always thinking more than, is there potential for more than one season or whatever, I don't know. But that was a conversation. And so through these conversations, they were like, "Oh, did you have any other ideas for what happens after?" And I did, and I already had certain ideas, but through these conversations, they really teased out. And so I began to get quite excited, and I only write a story if I'm really excited about it, because I think it takes so much energy and time.
Yeah.
And so with in declaring the potential for a sequel or whatever, that these ideas were just pouring out, and I was getting excited and getting real energy from it. And if in the unlikely event the adaptation was produced, I think they would want some contribution from me, which would be cool and I'd be totally happy with. But I would also probably not want to wet my powder and giving that to an adaptation. I think it's a decision I would want to make in the event it was produced. I'd want to make before.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense too. You pour your heart and soul as a creative into the landscape of your stories, to give it to an adaptation before actually allowing yourself to have that agency over what that direction was, makes absolute sense. I think. So let's now talk about, before we round up, let's talk about the last guest, because I know you might not be able to say too much, but it's so exciting to hear that it's set in Rotorua. So it's so cool that you're doing that. Tell us what you can about it.
Yeah, sure. I'm really sick of the story, but I'll tell you.
I love it.
It's really beating me down. I wrote this thing. I thought it was finished probably 9 months ago, and then and it just wasn't right, and so I tore it down and rewrote it, and then same thing, editing, like just went through this really arduous kind of redrafting. This is just a loan, by the way, so this wasn't with any input. And then I got to the end and it was adequate, but it just wasn't necessarily the story I wanted to tell, and so I've just redrafted it, and I sent it I actually sent it on Monday morning at like 3:30 a.m. because it was due like 2 weeks ago and we could push it back. And I felt pretty happy when I sent it off, but hopefully we can make it a lot stronger because I think there's still a lot of work to do. But essentially, it's about so everyone knows Airbnb, obviously. So it's the premise or the conceit is the very first chapter, someone checks into an Airbnb, and this is in Auckland City, and they wheel their suitcase into this tiny little terrace house, and so they go to the lockbox, get the keys out, go inside, unzip the suitcase, and it's just full of power tools and boxes of cameras, these tiny little cameras. And this person just goes around installing all these cameras in an Airbnb, and then, makes it look like, so pours half the milk down the drain and wets the towel and messes up the bed and stuff, and then cuts the keys, drops the originals back and checks out. And so the idea of the story is, in a world where so much is shared online anonymously, and there's these networks of, essentially perverts. There's these networks that aren't necessarily doing this, but are sharing exploitation material and just surveillance material and things online. I wanted to write a bit about the potential of that. And ask questions around voyeurism and surveillance, and I think in both books there's a commentary on the media's complicity
with that, and encouraging that culture.
Because it's in the attention economy, it's just combative between media outlets it's a race to the bottom. And so there's a bit about social media, there's a bit about traditional media, news media, and there's also a lot about support for ex-military and what that looks like in real terms. The sense of purpose that's instilled in military whilst they're representing the country and in the military service, how that can safely is probably not the right way to put it, but essentially safely, how can that translate to functioning in a regular society as a productive member of a community. So there's a lot there. It probably sounds a lot better than it is actually. I think I'm doing a good job of selling it, but it's
No, it sounds, I want to buy it and I want to read it immediately, but I know what you mean by you have a knack for delving into the psychological landscape of man. That seems to be your interest, sort of some of the, and I sort of read, as I was reading Evie as well, I was like, wow, you know, it's something that you thought up. Imagine if this were to happen. And so is this your genre? Have you found your genre? Is this thriller, suspense? Is that where you want to play? Or do you ever see yourself writing a comedy? You know?
Yeah, well, my first love is literary fiction, I think. But you know, I came to crime, and it was late in the piece. And it was books like Gone Girl, you know, books that were particularly well written, that had all the signals that it was a serious literary work, but with all the commercial thriller elements and suspense elements. So that's definitely areas I want to be writing in. In saying that, I think more and more I'm attracted to. I think my strength in terms of my imagination is speculative, not spec fic, but speculative tech kind of things.
Yeah. Right.
And the potential and risks in these things. I mean, In the Clearing was just so much fun to write, and I really loved it. And the story came to me, you know, instantly. And there are elements of, you know, cryptocurrency to pay anonymously for, you know, and the gig economy to pay for services that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get anonymously, like delivering the flowers and things like that. And so there's an element of it in The Clearing, but ultimately it's a contemporary story. Whereas I think after the last guess is mildly kind of speculative, and then after that, the next thing that I've kind of been playing with the idea of is a just one step further, which it's at the moment working titles The Memory Surgeon.
Nice.
So we're going. This is 2022, by the way. We're leaving forward 2 years. But yeah, so that's the sort of, I guess, the areas I think that's where my strengths lie, I would say.
Yeah, and that's where you're at the moment, as well as an artist and as a writer, and it's a fantastic place to be. And it's obviously, I mean, it's resonating out there with your readers, and it's landed well with the crime thriller literary fiction audience as well. So that's really wonderful. So you've got The Last Guest coming up, The Memory Surgeon. You mentioned Gone Girl, and actually when you were talking about The Last Guest and the setup of the crime scene, I thought of Gone Girl. You know, because she's very much so crafty, and and you've got a wonderful also ability to write dual characters for your singular characters. You know, like these dual personalities, like the femme fatale. You're really, really, really talented at that. And is that something that you also, it must interest you, right? Tell me a little bit about that, writing dual characters.
Yeah. So I think interiority, or like the interior world of the characters. When you say that writing these dual kind of characters, I think the distinction being an awareness of self versus how we present ourselves to the world. And so I think most people, perhaps naively, or maybe not, but many people will think they know other people, even after a short period of time.
Yeah.
But only the most vulnerable really give us everything. And when I say everything, I say most things, because there's things that they don't really understand themselves. And so for me, it's about trying to access that and give that insight to the reader, even sometimes if the characters don't know it themselves, their own kind of potential, their own weaknesses or whatever. I think Freya, for instance, is particularly aware of herself, whereas Kate is not. So yeah, there's that. For me, there's a lot of fun writing characters that are both self-aware but also completely oblivious.
Yeah, and playing with that existentialism as well. It's just such a wonderful realm. And actually, I started to think about Zeitgeist and Out of the Shadows. I don't know if you've seen that. There's Out of the Shadows is it's a Zeitgeist-esque documentary that's been published recently on YouTube about the media and about how, like, who owns the media and the companies, and like psychological, like storytelling, and Disney being a psychological weapon to actually manipulate the mass consciousness. So when you start talking about The Last Guess and The Memory Surgeon, and how you're interested in the realm of technology and the virtual world, and how that's sort of like a space creation for crime and other sort of like places for this culture to grow, it's really fascinating, and I think you've certainly landed upon quite a niche market, and you're very good at it. So that's really helpful. 10 years time, I mean, gosh, who knows where we're going to be in 10 years time, but sort of just to wrap up, where do you, like, what is, if you could now sort of say, this is what my passion is, it's doing this, what are you as an artist? What's the essence of you as an artist now? And then where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty kind of pertinent question in the arts at the moment because of issues with, I mean, unfortunately, you know, I'm operating in a space where there is commercial potential. So it's been okay for me, but in the arts in general, and books and, you know, the sort of content that's everyone's just creating all the time, and the attention economy and the attention war, it's really hard to imagine where the market's going to be in 10 years' time, what sort of content and media people are going to be engaging. I'm growing more and more attracted to the idea of having some contribution to other areas of the arts, including film and TV. You know, I've never had that. I've never really had that ambition until wheels started to turn for Evie and in the clearing. And there's always that question: do you want to be involved in the writers' room, or do you want to, you know, what sort of creative input do you want, or control, or whatever? And I never really even thought about it. So I think in 10 years' time, ideally, I don't know, I can't keep this pace up, certainly not with the baby on the way. So I'll probably have, I'd like to think 5 to 6 books. I'm contracted for 2 more anyway, which takes me to 4.
You're going to be there in 2 years. So I think what's wonderful is it's just great. You're following your gut, you know. It's a really tough question, actually, Cian. I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years' time, but it's sort of like, I suppose, for people out there knowing that you don't know, all you know is that you're just trying to be true to yourself as an artist in the moment, and just see how it unfolds.
I think it's also, I mean, I think it's good to be, I think it's good to think about these things and be realistic about them. But ultimately, if I had 6 books out by 10 years' time, so whatever that is, 2030, and was still doing what I'm doing, I'd be pretty happy with that.
And I think, I know, you know, we touched on it at the beginning of the interview, but the Rotorua community, your whānau, Ngai Māori, are just so proud of you. I know I'm so proud of you. No, I can't really speak on behalf of all these communities, but we really are. And I think we also, as artists, we have this wonderful ability to, when we succeed, so do our communities, and so do our people and our whānau. And I think, you know, you being a New Zealand, a Kiwi, a Māori voice in that space internationally is huge. It's significant. You are creating space for future literary artists to step up into that space. And so I think I'll end the recording soon, but then we can say goodbye beyond that. But I just wanted to leave it with, if you have anything else to say, please do. Otherwise, what would you say to a young boy attending Rotorua Boys High that then moves on to Western Heights, about if they were like, I don't know what I want to do, but I think I like to write, or I think I want to be an artist? What advice could you give as a 30-year-old Josh to this young rangatahi from Rotorua that wants a maybe career in the arts?
I mean, if it was me in particular, I'd probably say stop being such a little shit. But if it was, just in a general sense. I mean, I got kicked out of the Excellent program at Boys High, and I get kicked out of class every day. And I think I'd like to think the paradigm of education has shifted such that we're more accommodating for, not that I'm necessarily neurodiverse, but certainly for different learning styles. And so I don't know what the education system looks like these days. I'm 14 years removed. But I guess in a general sense, what I would say is just to be patient. I think most important thing, and I think that's so hard because when you're 13, 14, if you say to someone, if you work really hard, and by the time you're 30, you might be lucky enough to have something published. That's three times all they've known. That's at a 13-year-old boy to be 30 by the time they achieve any sort of success in this field. You're saying to them, 3 times as long as you've been alive, you need to do that.
So it's like, buckle up. No, but I think, I like what you're saying there, because it's sort of like, it's almost like, are you saying you would say you are where you're meant to be?
I would say, yeah. I would say, I wouldn't say work hard for 20 years or whatever, because no one wants to do that. But when I say be patient, I mean, you just adjust your expectations and have an eye for short-term achievement of a long-term goal. Because I think one thing I was very naive about until I was about 25 maybe is that the book deal comes first, or the book comes first. But really it's not. You're taking from this community your entire life. You're reading books. You're taking from this community, and if that's the measure of your engagement, is how many books you read, as opposed to how many other writers you support, how many readings you go to, how many literary magazines you contribute to or subscribe to, whatever. I think that's a more important indicator of where you're at than how many books you've read or how many words you've written. I think the most important thing is, at that early stage, is engaging a writing community, join a writers group. I remember when I was 19 or something, 20, and I was the youngest in like a writing workshop thing by about 40 years. And like when I look back on that Josh, I'm really proud that I did that. And I think although I definitely wasn't mature at all at that age, I think that was a moment of maturity, like of identifying that you need to engage a community and learn from other writers and kind of develop the support network where people are reading your work and giving you feedback and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know. I'd probably just say, be patient and make sure you're giving back to this community that you're hoping to, be a part of. Yeah,
wonderful. And I think that, again, it's that saying, if you succeed, we succeed. So we're very much a we people, and Rotorua's, very community proud place as well. So
yeah. And I should apologise if my dad is bullying people on the streets in Rotorua and buying my books. It would not surprise me.
That is so cool. And before we do exit, I just want to show you all out there. Sorry, this is a well-thumbed book. Call Me Evie and In the Clearing. In the comment section of this recording, you will find links to purchase Josh's books. So JP Pomare, In the Clearing, and award-winning Call Me Evie. Please do you can go to McLeod's and purchase the book. Also, you can go onto Te Aka Mauri online catalogue, and they've got a number of books that you can hire out during this time when they're closed during COVID-19. Look out for when they will open again, though, when you will be able to come in to hire a book in the Rotorua Library. And it'll be, just keep an eye on the Facebook page for notifications around that. Josh, I'm so grateful for your time. You are an absolutely inspiring, just wonderful artist. And again, I know I've said it heaps, but we're very fortunate that you're from Rotorua as well. So wonderful, wonderful stuff. And we just absolutely wish you all the best. And I can't wait to follow you on your journey and see where your nose and your heart and your gut takes you as a storyteller. And also the exciting potential of you delving into the world of TV and film as well. I really look forward to seeing you and sharing that journey. And is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, just a big thanks. This has been fun. So yeah, thanks for organising it. And hopefully I can get back over there soon, depending on how things progress from now. Hopefully I can get back and catch up with everyone in Rotorua soon.
Yep, awesome, Josh. So I'll end the recording, but if you wanted to stay on, we can say goodbye beyond that. Okay, thank you for everyone who watched the live recording. Kia ora.